Hello, everyone. Welcome, Phil. This is our first episode of Exploring the Cosmic Universe, so part one. And this is a three-part series. So this is going to be a fun, exciting looking into mysticism, hermeticism, the occult, as well as looking into ancient cultures and exploring what it is, not just our creation story, but also the story of the universe from a mystic spiritual perspective. And with this, my idea or the concept as well is to try and extract tools or extract knowledge that we can see across ancient cultures or ancient belief systems so that we can apply these principles, whether it's for manifestation or creation in our own right. So big thank you to Phil for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here on this wonderful channel with with the wonderful people in the audience, and of course the lovely Solreta, who's looking absolutely lovely today. So there's that word lovely. I'm going to use it lots. Thank you everyone for having me. Thank you for everyone for joining us. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this chat. And we've been talking about this a bit and getting some stuff together so that we can have a really fun and interactive and sort of engaging experience with the audience, during the chat and also the live, and also after the live for people watching the replay.
Yeah, thank you for the beautiful compliment too. And I think it's a Kiwi Australian thing and English thing. We do say lovely a lot.
Indeed.
Yeah. And it's so lovely to have, I just said it again. It's so nice to have our soul family here with us. So before we start to get into tonight's chat, I just want to remind you guys, there's only, I think it's about a week left before Sophie's readings before the price goes back up. So do take advantage of this. You'll see it just on the front page of Maison Jupiter. So save 10% off with the code word Valentine. And this is a reading that you will find more information on the consultations page. You can click in and find out the actual information behind it. And I also have my readings available. Please use the discount code Jupiter for a session with me. And if you're watching tonight on YouTube, please remember to hit that thumbs up button so that we can keep bringing you great shows like this. And I also want to show that Phil has his Substack as well. So you can go over to Phil Rice, .substack.com. And Phil also has, if you click up the top, you'll see bookings. So Phil's got Reiki and tarot and meditation and a whole heap of things for you guys to have a look at. So let's get into tonight's show. I wanted to perhaps both of us having a look into cards tonight to see what it was that this idea of exploring the universe, why was it that we were guided to this? And what is it that our audience needs to know? Can I get you to pull some cards around this, please, Phil?
Oh, please. Thank you. Yeah. So, we came up with the idea of a show, like we wanted to do a show, and I think, like you said at the beginning, how can we make it valuable and useful and these types of things? So, when I pull out the 10 of Wands here and we look at the sort of, we'll take it on the positive angle of like, there are ways to develop our perceptual capabilities so that we can perceive more data and higher resolutions of the data to help us with our decision making and inform our navigational process while we're here on our earth walk, so that we can, cultivate more of that which we wish to develop. Because when we've got more information at our availability, and we can also, sort of detect greater value, maybe, prior to developing our perceptions, we had a familiar item that we couldn't see that there was some value in there yet. But once we develop these, and this is why I love teaching hermetics and practicing hermetics, because it's a very structured way to develop perceptions. But the hermetic stuff is, given if I go more towards the negative or the more maybe what this is, it is a task. It takes time and it takes effort, but the fruits are very sweet, especially when you're reaching to the top of the tree. So, as far as the conversation goes today, we want to cover a few different aspects from the point of view of, a grounded approach. Well, especially for myself, I found such great value in exploring, that which I have. We can see the chap here. He's got it amongst himself. Like there's not a lot going up here. It's sort of here down. It's very similar to the 9 of coins, where we see a lady and everything's sort of under her hand. So we're working with what we have in a sort of I guess you might call it a way of acknowledging what we have and what we can do with it, and also moving forward. Obviously, this being a masculine type card, we're being active in our pursuit of exploring extra value within familiar types of resources and input sensory. And I'll pull one more to round it out to 3. And we've got another king here. And and for me, when I see this card, and I'm just pulling these cards out. I haven't picked cards. Sometimes I will, because I use them as teaching images. But in this case, we're just pulling some cards. And for me, when I see this chap is very balanced. He's got his emotional world in the background. It might, it can be quite tumultuous, but he's in the foreground. He's very relaxed. And, I think that's a great way to set up an interaction for people too, is that we're wanting to deep dive, but we're also aware of currents and things that can grab us. And so we're, on one hand, we're riding these currents, but we're also taking a very balanced and objective view of what we're witnessing.
Oh, thank you for that. And as Tim said, wow, the royal road tonight.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
And I can see Celestial Emma saying, wow, this community is very high in the trees. So let's have a look into, I'll pick 3 cards as well, and just to see what it was that we were being guided to share with you guys. And it's interesting, Spirit's actually giving me the words. It's like they're wanting to show us what was born of the universe. And I'm reminded of, in various different ancient cultures or scripture, they talk about, and from a Christian perspective too, not that I've grown up with religion, they talk about that humanity was made in the image of God. So they're just like underlying that word made, whereas they're talking very specifically around wanting to show us how things were actually more organically born or birthed from a cosmic universe point of view. So I'll fill into these 3 cards. So what I do get is like massive amount of like flickering light. I'm seeing purples and pinks and gold, and just it's almost like a rave or a disco of light flashing and coming in. And I do feel that there's consciousness behind that. Then all of a sudden I'm hearing a hum tone come in, and everything's sort of going quiet. And then I'm seeing this light and music being organized as structure. And then I'm seeing it almost like a crystal being projected and I guess reflected into what we know as the earth realm. So trippy image. Didn't expect to see that. I'm just going to flip these cards over. And what we're actually seeing, I would say this relates to our current take on reality. So if we're thinking about those lights and we're thinking about the sound and that perhaps being unorganized at the start, but then we get it together, I guess, as gods and goddesses, and then we start to actually project or send a signal of that reality. So we're starting to harmonize. And I do feel this is about getting back to it. And I feel that that's the essence of why Spirit led us to talk about this, is how can we create something out of chaos? How can we birth, or they keep giving me the word born. So it's interesting. They're not really talking about like the birth process, whether we're going through that now, and now it's about the born process. But I've got the 8 of Swords. So we need to get out of our limitations in terms of our mental and out of our limited versions of self. Because as we know, the 8 of Swords, she's traditionally bound up with a blindfold, and she can't see anything outside of her reality. So we need to step outside of our limited version and step into the Hanged Man. So this Jupiter expansion, creative consciousness, where we actually get to look at it from outside the matrix perspective. At the moment, we're still kind of fighting it. So we've got a Princess Swords. We're too tied in emotionally to the projection, to the programmings and things that are happening down here. So with this, we can see her fighting this mental energy. We're trying to mentally work out this equation, or we're trying to mentally understand why is this happening. But really, we need to come back and tap into the emotion. So yeah, that's what I've got in terms of the 3-card pick. And I can see a few people saying, Britt Marie saying, I felt a big shift today as well. And I love where Tim's going. Tim, you're picking up on what Phil and I have been chatting about. So, starseed DNA fused with the Earth originals. So, this is a lot of the creation story, too, when we look at it from ancient perspectives. Is there anything you want to add to that, or the combination of our cards together?
Yeah, I think the Hanged Man is there's a lot of layers in that card. And when we see it in the sort of the I'll see if I can just find the Rider Waite version while I've got my cards right here real quick, because I'm
And I'll hold this.
reasonable. You hold that space. Here we go. So here's the Rider Waite version. Okay. And so what we see here is that we see someone who may look like they're disadvantaged, but there's an awareness and a knowing of something that sets them apart. Then they're not unhappy that they're facing that way. They accept that there may be some kind of disadvantage, maybe from the perspective of others who don't have the wider vista of reality. Like when you seek to step back and view things from the meta point, you're seeing that there is, the cosmic wheelworks are at play to deliver and, generate the order chaos cycle. But, entropy, things just naturally decay and fall apart, but it takes effort to build things. And so, but yeah, like you said, stepping outside of conventional thinking is how you if you're in the soup, then the soup is influencing you and your choices and decision making. So to be able to step outside of that and separate yourself from the soup so you can see it, and then seek to minimize the influence it has, so that you can create, like you said, the order, which is more of what we would like to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're starting to see that emerge a little bit. There is a little bit of organization and structure starting to come out of some of the chaos over the last few years, and we'll feel a flux with that. Some days it feels like it, other days
Yeah.
it doesn't. So let me just look at my little notes that I've got. So when we hear it from, I guess, the system that most of us were programmed with in school, we're taught this Big Bang theory, and this, just jotting it down from sort of like a logical, methodical viewpoint reminded me of when I was in college. I actually saw this symbol. It was a circle that had a cross through it and a line through the middle. And I remember in college watching a documentary. I can't remember who the narrator was, whether it was David Attenborough or one of those beautiful meditative voices, but they actually used that symbol with the circle and the crosses in it as a symbol to represent creation. So there is something about this coming together of energies, or this divine spark that's sort of universally talked about or shared. But they talk about this giving rise to, I guess, the creation of our universe or cosmos. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that around like your perspective, or anything that that resonates for you around the Big Bang, or this like divine unfolding that they talk about in many other cultures?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to, incorporating more of a conventional materialist worldview, which is largely what the general worldview is, I'm aware that there was a survey that was taken. I was listening to Rupert Sheldrake talk about this, that across academic institutions in the UK and perhaps a little wider, they did a survey to see, what percentage of academics were actually atheist, and there was only 25%, and that's quite telling, considering that the worldview that generally sort of presents itself to us is that, it's quite materialistic, even though people operating in it may have a much wider view. But the purpose of science is to be, highly objective and to create repeatable, observable, recordable results, and to, rinse and repeat and experiment within parameters and controls. But, there are overlaps in the more metaphysical, spiritual take on the creation myth or the birth story of the universe, and there's obviously several of them, and more so even. Just about every tradition has their version of the cosmogony, the birthing of reality. But one thing we can do is that we can look to see, well, how does the current scientific paradigm sort of agree? Where do they agree? Where do they complement each other? And where do they conflict, in a sense, or where they butt up against each other? And straight off the top of my head, they both, the Big Bang sort of talks about this event where, all of a sudden there was nothing, and then all of a sudden there was something. And it started off from a single point, a single spawn point. And, you know, a lot of the metaphysical traditions will talk about the same thing. So there's one space that they have that they sort of agree on. And then, of course, you know, this expansion is another area that they agree on. Like they say that because of the Big Bang, things are going out, they're expanding, they're heading in a direction. They can see a history because, you know, light takes so long to travel, so they can measure movement points and trajectories and things like this. So, you know, that's another thing too. You know, we see that life wants to grow and to expand and to encompass more. So there's another area. They also agree on this principle of vibration, you know, that there are things at the the small places, the very subtle realms. There is a vibration or a movement, if you will, that goes on, which brings in the Hermetic law of rhythm as well. And, you know, we find cooperative understanding there. And also that's essentially time is an illusion, but it's a very persistent illusion that we've sort of attributed, you know, things changing to this kind of duration of you know, a type of a measurable duration being the metric for understanding how, you know, like, because we see something change and we've come up, well, it's something's passing when we see this moon and the sun moving around, and so we measure this passage of time through that. But just to quickly go in, but they don't agree on everything, you know. Consciousness, from the spiritual point of view, had a purpose. It wanted to make a thing, you know, like maybe it was lonely and so it created another thing, and then it carried on creating, right? But then, of course, you know, from the scientific materialistic point of view, it's a random creation. Okay. And another one is that materialism is basically first there was matter and then there was sentience. Whereas in spiritualism, if you will, or the spiritual point of view, you know, consciousness existed and then created matter. And then there's linear versus cyclical time. You know, when you get into the astral realm, and which is a timeless space, you know, it's a much more fluid and different experience. Very hard to perceive unless you spend time in there and get to know it. And lastly, you know, the physical laws sort of constrain a lot of opportunity within the scientific paradigm, but they're coming at it from a very grounded level, but they're still using a limited tool and perception set. And the perceptual model is limited, but it's still reasonably robust, but not always, you know, because they're leaving out important things. And so, you know, but divine will, you know, that's you know, there are these divine laws or these principal universal laws. And that's how we can sort of help to make sense of it from a metaphysical and spiritual point of view, that there is a wherewithal, there is a sense of a maths or lawfulness that operates. And that's how we can seek to understand things like cause and effect and karma to help us navigate.
Oh, there's so much knowledge dropped in that answer. I love that. I could break it up into 10 different questions. Thanks, Phil. So with that too, modern, I guess, you know, physics is also talking about multiple dimensions, or that there's multiverses. And we see that reflected throughout the movies because, you know, mass consciousness or movies and things tend to have little truths in them, or like little seeds or threads that will underline a bigger truth. So they do talk about, I guess, there was string theory. I'm trying to think, there was an M theory as well. But yeah, we do have where they talk about like multiple different ones. And when we look at it from a mystic or a spiritual perspective, and very much like in the readings I do, I always talk about that we're not here in like this linear concept of, you know, past, present, future. It really is the multiverse, and we're able to access or utilize or pull on these various different aspects of self. So, you know, you can literally change or create your reality by tapping into other vibrational forms of you. So it's almost like asking yourself how to master certain skills, or how to start to hold that resonance or vibration within self. But I agree with you. It's more that we first have that spiritual or divine spark or essence, and then we have the material created. Just like when we're creating from a quantum point of view, it's to first give way to let go of attachment and to put your body and your heart. So we're magnetically attracting with the heart, And it's our thoughts and our feelings that are going out to spark or to be that resonance for that creation to come into being. But it's our heart that magnetizes it and brings it into physicality. So if we're looking at that from this original perspective of being, I guess, created or made in the image of God, meaning how I guess they commonly talk about man, but of course we have women too. But yeah, it might sort of symbolize that there was a consciousness that first, brought this into existence. And we might have some fairies with us. I've seen Marie give us the fairy emoji. So let us know if there's fairies as well tonight. But yeah, just looking at it from that perspective, I think if we are made in the same image, now remember at the start, Spirit kept giving us this definition, underlying made as opposed to being born. So what does it mean to be made as opposed to be born? Do you have like a take on that or a perspective on those two definitions?
Yeah, I mean, like words are going to mean different things to different people depending on who you ask. So, we have the original etymological root definitions of words that come from anywhere from Greek to Latin and so on and so forth. And then over time, those denotative sort of core understandings, the original meanings of the words, which are the most powerful, they change over time and they become more connotative, or, the connotation of what that means, or the popular current understanding. So, as far as kind of like making sense of reality so that we can leverage our knowledge and understanding to create some kind of thing in the world, knowing how like I said, the wheelworks of nature operate. First of all, we have to become aware of the very subtle nature of reality. And, with hermetics, for example, so we have a physical plane, which is bound by time and space. This is the world of biomechanics and, things and form, shape, colors, and all this type of thing, right? It's pretty much the bottom. It's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And then if we pull back up one layer, we then get into this more subtle layer, which is the vital astral, which is, not bound by time. We could loosely call this, I guess, in some case. It's not. Yeah, it's so the astral, like from a hermetic point of view, is it's color and form, but it hasn't quite densified, because when you're going this way from the point up from the top to the bottom, there's a journey of manifestation where an idea starts to form into something, and then it sort of phases into reality and densifies. And so then, of course, we have the mental plane, which is bound which is not bound by space. It's spaceless, but it's bound by time. We work with time. So we have time and space at the bottom. Then we have, and I'm using these loose kinds of areas of the body, what we might call in Taoism the Dantian, okay, or the three bodies. We have the vital, which is the lower Dantian, the astral, which is the middle Dantian, and then the mental, which is the upper Dantian, also referred to as the spirit or the Shen. And, each one of these bodies has a pliability that we can explore to discover how it can be used. It has perceptual capabilities. We can sense the different layers and then granulate further and discover more within those realms. And then we also have the ability to, affect our will on each one of these planes. And so a thought becomes a feeling, becomes an action. And so the causation chain comes down like this, right? And so I'm sorry, I may be wandering off the original sort of question, but
keep going. It's beautiful.
okay, cool. So, coming to understand how each one of the bodies plays a role in the creation process helps us to sort of grasp, okay, because these three aspects of ourselves, they can be mischievous and they can be a bit wonky and unruly. And, and it's like the ego, if you haven't, the ego is just part of who you are. It's how you self-identify so that you can, do things in the world. But there is this idea of an unrefined or an immature ego that is largely unhelpful. And so each one of the three bodies can essentially be refined to become operational quite optimally. And so we learn how to school each one of the bodies. So, for example, the lower physical body would be the animal instincts of like, I'm hungry, I want to eat, like a dog will just keep eating, sort of thing. But we're seeking to raise up within each one of these bodies to higher sort of functional, a higher vibe. It's a vibrational scale, if you will. So within the physical body and and what we might call the vital body, we can give our body good food. We can, expose ourselves to favorable environments that lead to the development of more of flourishing in a positive, healthy way, And then in the astral body, this is the feeling and the sensation and the emotional body. And so there are ways to refine that so we're not just having these highly charged emotional reactions, anger, worry, all these kinds of things. We want to raise that up. And then in the mental body, we have the faculties of our what we'd call our spirit, which is everything from awareness and concentration and being able to manage the mental space. And so each one of these three bodies can either run amok or they can be harmonized to run optimally, and then they synchronize and fuse, and they're like three gears working with each other rather than working against each other and you're in chaos. Perfect example, you're physically at a job that you don't like and you're thinking about being somewhere else. You're completely out of alignment. The pipe's all bent and wonky. You want to straight through. You're at the job that you like, or you're doing the work that you like, and you're focused on it. And so you've got this alignment, and that's how you get the best out of yourself, because you're fully present with what you're doing. You're not spreading your awareness over too many things. You've got the phone, you're thinking about this, that, and the other thing. You're able to focus, and that feeds in well to the manifestation process, because you can think about it, you can feel it, and you can, essentially take the action to make it happen, to build those access pathways so that you can manifest what it is that you would like.
Oh, I love that. That ties in with something that I was thinking this morning. I had 3 options around making a decision for something really exciting that's been coming up this year, like further projected into the year. And I was trying to think, there was like confusion. Sometimes you're given options and there's confusion around things, or you're like, oh, I'd like to explore that, but I don't know if I want to commit to that. Anyway, I just sort of asked myself, what is the higher thing I'm trying to grasp or understand, where I'm hitting this kind of wall emotionally with not committing to something? And the Spirit was just showing me, I need to really just follow that spark of joy, that excitement. And you just explained it to me in a very tangible way, in that, you want that congruency between whether we call it, mind, body, or soul, or those Dantian energy centers. Rudolf Steiner also spoke about this too, in that there's certain types of people that will see more into the spiritual realms or spiritual worlds. And he also talked about the various different layers and levels of, I guess, this earth realm that we're living in, as well as the astral worlds. I just wanted to share with you guys this. So I popped into Gematria Cosmic Universe because I wanted to see what the Gematria perspective was and the value with the words. And don't forget that whether we're talking about astrology, numerology, or we're talking about mathematics, that is an underlying code in the source code of the universe. So this is also why we're looking this up. But what we see is a few interesting ones. We've got Yahweh here. We've got
right at the top.
Yeah, right at the top. The prophecies of love. So yeah, there's a few interesting ones that stand out around this as well. Yeah, it's just always interesting to look into it from a gematria perspective. And I know when Phil and I were talking about the idea for the show, and we were talking about, I guess, the words just by itself, like cosmic and universe, and why they sort of similarly perhaps mean 2 common things. When we look at it from a cosmic perspective, I feel it is more that perspective like the Hanged Man that we talked about, whereas I guess the universe from a scientific point of view doesn't always get looked at from that spiritual value. And I also just want to say thank you so much for the beautiful comments in the chat. Here we are celebrating Maison Jupiter's 6th anniversary, as Tim said right at the start. And
wow. Yeah, you guys, haven't you done well? Haven't you done well and accrued such a wonderful audience too? It's a
Yeah.
testament to your efforts. Well done, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And Julie's amazing. Like the way that she sets everything up and just her holding this spark of creation so that it comes into
Mm.
being. So the next topic that I had was around the cosmic web. So looking into, we hear that, plasma being one of those fourth states of matter and perhaps being that thing that sort of interpenetrates our physical and the astral. And even we've talked about in other shows on plasma that we've done, we have the plasma waters within the body, within the womb space that goes up and down the cerebrospinal fluid and within the choroidal plexus of the brain. We also have the plasma that has been seen over New Jersey at the moment. So the plasma orbs, there's also the plasma beings or the giant jellyfish and things that are seen on the International Space Station. And some of these things seem to be communicating or feeding off electricity. So what I was really looking into this with the cosmic web side of things is our thoughts and I guess the way that our hearts magnetize things to us, it's perhaps pulling on this underlying web of the universe, and maybe that's how we're able to utilize this cosmic force. And we see that within Tai Chi or Qigong, things that you practice regularly. What's your take on the cosmic web?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And so, we could view this from the point that there is, like I said, we have time and space here on the physical. We have a timeless space. The astral is timeless. The mental or the spirit, what we'd call the spiritual body or the house of the spirit, the immortal spirit is spaceless, but we still operate with time. And then we have what we call the Akashic or the void or the Wu-Ji body in Taoist terminology, which is essentially the sprout point for these other three layers that sort of, if you think about a finger coming down, like at the tip is the physical, then you've got the astral, then you've got the mental, and the spawn point is this kind of dark violet, if you will. That's the clairvoyant sort of view of this color, of this energy, which is the akasha or the void, which is the ultimate underlying substrate or stillness that everything spawns from, and what is often referred to as the mother or the mum of God. So God having essentially in some ways sort of like a yin yang aspect. And so then you've got the unmanifested light, which may be considered to be more like the daddy, if you will. And so you have the void of nothing, which is also, if you think about the Akashic records, right, and this kind of thing, that's an aspect of the ultimate library and storehouse of everything that has, is, and ever will be kind of thing, has been, and that. And so the light comes through and then it just manifests out of this void space. And so the void is essentially infinity. It's timeless and spaceless. And so everything exists in this moment, from the same point. So when we look at a holographic model, we see this idea of the all within the all. The universe is represented in every atom and every part of this thing. It's just that it's manifested it into this particular form. But it's filtering itself out. It's what we have here is that we have restriction. We have restrictions of time. Things only last so long before they begin to decay, if you will. Things are, of certain shapes. We're restricting the ultimate because in the ultimate, there's, the ultimate nirvana, or the ultimate, non-duality. Everything's just one. We're putting reality back together again, essentially, on the return path, as opposed to the manifestation path. And so, we're filtered down versions of everything. The pen is a filtered down version of everything. We've got the necessary bits and we've put them together and we've left out the bits that we don't need. It's like the carver with the block going, okay, this, not that. And that's how we, can kind of see it there. But as far as the interconnectivity in the web goes, once we have a satisfyingly tangible, we can demonstrate to ourselves and be satisfied that there is an underlying common denominator between everything in all of creation at the physical, astral, and the other levels. What is the ultimate substrate that underlies all things? And that is the access point, because when you're dealing with spacelessness, you don't travel to somewhere. You just think it, and then you just become aware of it, right? So that may be the difference between, say, astral travel and, say, where you're traveling through space, and sort of mental wandering, which you can use your mental body to travel through the astral, but your mental body can just arrive there. You don't travel to the moon. You can fly to the moon if you want, or you can just go, I want to be there right now, and you can, because you're basically just tuning yourself in to that three-dimensional space location. Everything has an address, and this is where you get the each one of the three bodies has a different function or a different frequency, or on the Stargate, like on Stargate SG-1, right? How they program in the 7 chevrons or whatever it was. Basically, each one of these has its own set of chevrons, and we can dial this one here, a color, this one here, a feeling sensation, and this one here, a body mechanic. And sound, or the impetus to create sound, we can experience it at all 3 levels. And that's what we do in our particular form of letter magic or Kabbalah, is that we can tune them in. But to finish off and answer your question, yeah. So seeking out the common denominator, or the underlying web where all things can be accessed and viewed, just here's a contemplation. What would it feel like to be spaceless and timeless? Like that's one for the audience. I mean, maybe we'll talk about this in another show, maybe some exercises and things. But that's just, like I said, from the Hermetic point of view. It's also seen in Vedic cosmogony as well, this idea of the Akasha. And I think the other one's Indra's web, this interconnectivity of all things. But yeah, ultimately what I've come across is that all the traditions generally talk about the 4 elements, or 5. They have a 4 or 5 element system, and that's represented at each layer of reality, and we can break them up. That's easy to do. And then they all talk about this void, or this common denominator spawn point, and everything essentially is composed of energy, consciousness, and information. And so when we're talking about plasma and breaking it down into one of these other models, if you will, is plasma a programmable medium? And energy, there's the energy, which is the medium essentially, and the thing that powers it. There's the consciousness, or the intelligence, and how it self-organizes. And then there's the information, or the intent, that we put onto the thing so it knows what to do. And so I have to say, like, I've come across some conversations on plasma, but I've really got to do more of a deep dive to sort of understand some of the background context behind it. So yeah.
And I think we'll definitely be exploring that theme throughout this little 3-part series. What I was taking away from what you were saying, if we apply it on a practical level, just even doing things like yoga, and when you get to that final stage of Shavasana, where you're able to let go and relax and kind of just be one with the universe, it's like you've wrung out all of the excess water of your mind, and you're able to just kind of float and exist. So that's I guess my practical way of how I try and get to that point of view. Probably not doing it often enough. The other thing too, if we look into ancient cultures that harnessed plasma, and I do believe it is programmable, we see that in the Tartarian culture. So we've had Campbell, who's been on Mason Jupiter's show before, on the Galactic show too. So if you guys have not seen that episode, go check out the episode I did with Campbell on the Galactic show, and that was on Mason Jupiter. So with that, we see that there was buildings, and they had rods that were able to harness or bring in that chi, whether we call it prana, chi, or plasma. And they also had different plasma devices where people were able to, through kind of like a plasma-like screen, they had some kind of, way of windowing or peeking into other realms or dimensions. So they would have visions of faces of people's loved ones that had passed, and they would have this spirit communication device. So definitely things that Phil and I can go into on the future. But when you talked about the Akasha, it reminded me of a reading that I did just a few months ago where it came up with someone who was working with the Hall of Records, the Akashic Records. And Spirit then took me before the Hall of Records was created and talked about a race of beings that were from outside of our, I guess, normal space time or outside of our dimension. And they were called the Akasha. And they were talking about, I saw these long robed beings that brought forward and birthed, I guess, our library of Akashic records, but it came from somewhere else first, was what they were showing me, which I'd never even thought of before. So it was really interesting that even if we want to get back to a source or an essence of information before our universe was created, we can perhaps make contact with some of these Akasha beings to find out more or traverse even deeper back throughout our cosmic history or birth story.
Yeah, so it's fairly a fairly popular understanding that there is a hierarchy of beings as we move up through these layers, if you will. I mean, these layers that I'm talking about are points on a linear scale. We're using a linear scale because it's just easier to make sense of. It's very easy to relay that and convey information to people when we use something that people are familiar with. But essentially, these things, these three bodies, are just like if you're looking along a long map, if you're standing at the top of a mountain and looking over a long island, like say the South Island of New Zealand, for example, you're going to see a big landmark or a city, and those are the places that stand out. But there's strata along the way. And and I just want to say quickly what you said before, just to cover it, because I think it's important. When you're talking about yoga, you're opening the body up, right? And you're relaxing it, and you're essentially quieting the noise. And if you listen to someone like Tom Campbell, from the Monroe Institute, talk about, he was recently on Rogan, he did a lot of out-of-body stuff and talks about it still, is like, binaural beats and, what are the purposes of these things? One of the things that gets left out a little bit in maybe some of the Western practices is the importance of quietening the body, because it's the loud stuff that gets in the way of you being able to focus on harmonizing. And so, when you open the body up and keep it nice and pliable and flexible, you essentially eliminate the contraction and the muscle stress and that, which frees up your attention because it dominates and captures your awareness. And there's ways of quietening the astral and the mental bodies as well. Sorry, I did wander off the topic there. But
I'm just seeing Phil also, Jake was saying that Dolores Cannon also talks about beings who manage the Akashic records. Would these be at the same time? I'm not sure. So I haven't had a chance to read much of her information. I see bits and pieces, and I've got one of the books I started to listen to years ago. So yeah, really, really interesting. I'm going to have to pick your brain, Jake, and ask you some more around that. So we also wanted to look into from void to form, the divine intelligence behind matter. And with this, I've talked about on other shows that when I was in kindergarten, I remember laying in bed watching the sun come through the window, and I was in my parents' bed, which was one of those old cool like water beds, but they had a mattress in there, a normal mattress. I felt like I was in a spaceship. Anyway, I just remember they'd gotten up, they were doing different things, and I was laying there just watching the sun. And I remember dropping into void space, and it felt like this energetic propulsion or undulating wave that was dropping me lower and lower. And I don't mean on a frequency level, but deeper and deeper into what I can only describe as like a velvet curtain, where I felt like I was immersing or being amalgamated into the fabric of the universe. And as a child, we don't have the words to describe that. So a lot of the time, experiences or things that we don't often talk to adults about it because they don't always have an understanding. But that was my experience from being in that void. And it's something that I'll tap back into every now and then. As a child, it was quite scary because I thought I was going to like pixelate into non-existence. So I did stop the process. But, as we get into trust, because there is a huge element of trust, whether it comes into working with plant medicine or going into altered states or deep states or even hypnosis and things like that, there is this trust with kind of letting go of the singularity or that, not singularity, that small version of self, that ego. And I think when we do traverse or tap into wider questions around the universe, we have to learn how to kind of let go of that, or let go of that small voice to tap into a greater volume of information and to be able to funnel that back in. So I think that perhaps as a child, that was something that I was working with naturally. And it took a lot of trust, I guess, to know that I wasn't going to disappear into nothing. But yeah, that's my experience of going from like working with that void space. And I think it's still something that I work with in my readings, that I'm tapping into, other forms of intelligence, and working with other forms of consciousness to extract some of the information and the answers. What would be your point around that?
Yeah, so if we look at, say, if we use the tarot for an example, okay, and I'm just going to use a very, very rudimentary sort of understanding here. So here we have the zero, if you will, the naught, the placeholder. This is the full card, the very beginning. It's sometimes not even considered the first card of the tarot. It's just considered like the player card, And so this we have that zero there, which was never a number originally. It's just a placeholder, of space essentially before the one comes. But it became, So this is the beginning of the journey of what we would call from force into form, or from energy into matter. And then, of course, we have, and that's the first path on the tree of life that leaves from what we call the crown, or kether. And then we have that's the journey, that what they call the lightning bolt, that travels down the Kabbalistic tree. And then we have the return path. But at the other end, when things finally manifest from the void, if you will, then we have the universe, which is what we can see. The sort of hang on, I'll see if I can get this right. We've got this manifested universe. So this is the 21 card. Okay, and here's all the things. We can see the periodic table of the elements. We can see the four, I think they're the four cardinal points of the zodiac there, and we can see time and space, and the zodiac, and just reality in general. And we can see this kind of like it's not a Mobius strip, this thing in the background here, but it's like it's a geometry that sort of flows in and of itself. And so the journey from force into form, it starts with, where does the force come from? These are very rudimentary sort of words and terminologies. But like I said, they have to be relatable, because otherwise it's very hard to make sense of these things. And, part of the process of, being a teacher, if you will, is being able to take dense, pithy kinds of convoluted topics and information, especially if it's experiential. If you're a mystic or a shaman, you're walking worlds, and you're seeking to bring the knowledge and the wisdom down to the street, so you can talk to a bro and say, hey, and make it relevant and relatable to them. One thing that's really good, like, guys, if you're on this track, one thing I found highly valuable is to build out your synonyms and your descriptive language, so that you can find the right word to express and keep it in a tight package. But another way that this kind of because when you're talking about the void, where there's nothing and then there's something, right? You've got two ends of a pole. It's the same with these cards. These are essentially two ends of a journey. You've got a polarity here. You've got something and you've got nothing, right? The absolute vacancy of anything, and then you've got a thing, right? And so what happens is that you can explore different types of polarities and how that emerges. Now, this is where you've got to do a little bit of lateral thinking, but I'm going to share a bit of a thing you guys can do. So if you're into lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences, right? They are similar, but they're not the same. But there is a kind of an overlap, right? My experience is this. I've had lucid dreams where I've been in my bedroom. I've had out-of-body experiences where I've been in my bedroom. How do I determine the difference of those realities, so that I can start to get a grasp on how things manifest in each layer of reality? Because that's what happens is there's the nothing, what we might call the Akashic center above the head, and then we have the physical down here. So we'll treat those two poles. We'll treat them as that. So how does reality manifest here? How does it reality manifest at the mental or the spiritual, at the astral, and at the vital? So if we're just coming up with a couple of abstract ideas, one is, when I walk into the wall of a lucid dream, I just move. It's like I'm walking into this spongy nothingness there's the room that's been created, the construct of the room, like the holodeck in Star Trek, if you will. But when I walk into the wall, it's like I'm just sort of like I turn back into the stuff. It's like, you know, and then I come back out and there's a space there. But if I'm in an having an out of body experience, I can walk through that wall and I can pay attention to every layer of the wall because it exists. I'm exploring an already currently created thing, whereas the dream is more of a fabrication of the aspects of the back of the mind, if you will, like the subconscious, creating a thing for you to explore, like a little pocket or a sand pit. And so what happens is it's like, oh, okay, so in the dream environment, I walk into the wall. And I remember diving into the ocean into a lucid dream, and all I saw was all these squares, like a matrix, if you will. And it reminded me of the holodeck on Star Trek when they turn it off and there's like a construct, you know, behind the scenes projecting it. And, you know, it's like, oh, okay. So in a dream, it's this kind of stuff. And then in a out of body thing, it's more like it's something like I can explore as I move through the wall, and I can touch with my mind these things. And it's like, okay, well, over here, it feels like this, and over here it feels like this. So how does how does the void feel versus how does reality feel? And you start to explore the different layers and how they express. And so then once you get aware of that, then you can see, because once you experience it and become familiar with what happens, then you can learn to apply your will to it and start changing it and pulling it from each layer of reality into the next. Okay. And then you can learn how to go, how do I bring something from the mental down into the astral? How do I bring it from the astral into the physical, which is the ultimate manifestation of like clicking your fingers and an apple falls out and lands in your hand, like what they call apports, you know, or, you know, literally manifesting stuff out of nothing, right? You know, so that's how we kind of do it in Hermetics. We sort of reverse engineer and learn how to become aware of things. We learn to mentally merge with them, and then learn to get our fingers around them once we pick up them, and then see if we can jiggle it and do stuff, explore the pliability, how we can enjoy ourselves in the playful process and go, oh, once I apply my will to it, I can do stuff with it. It's not something that's happening to me or just a situation I'm in. I can actually start influencing it and changing it. And so we start with these baby steps. And that's kind of, you know, how we do it in the Hermetic hood, you know, like we just go, okay, I can play with this, but first I got to become aware of it, and then I can play with it.
Yeah. And there's so many great examples. I even heard Dr. Joe Dispenza's example of, I forget where he was, but there was the talk of, you know, he had, I think it was a nice wine or a nice piece of bread. And either way, he either manifested a bottle of wine appearing out of nowhere, or a piece of bread appearing out of nowhere. I forget which one, but it was more sort of feeling into, oh, you know what, it'd be perfect right now. And then it just came into existence. And we see that with stories of Sai Baba and Vibhuti manifesting, or ruby gold rings, you know, all these sorts of things manifesting into the material world. Those cards were perfect, by the way. You're using my favorite deck, the Thoth deck, and it's
I've got the big one too.
I've got the baby one.
I was so lucky. This was the only one that was available.
Oh, yeah, it's a good size for working with on YouTube too. And it's interesting, look at the bonus card at the bottom, which for me is about like tapping into that void space and bringing things into tangible reality, or choosing your own adventure, as Spirits nicknamed it. But when you held up the full card, to me, I relate that in Vedic astrology to the goddess Rohini, and a modern day interpretation would be Alice in Wonderland. So for me, it's always, you know, going down into that rabbit hole, kind of not knowing exactly what you're going to find at the bottom of the rabbit hole. It's about being in the present moment and letting things sort of come to you, but you're staying in your innocence. So you're protected on a soul level or on an astral level while you're passing through these various different dimensions. And then I usually will see the Magnus as sort of like the ultimate expression of when you've gathered all of that information and knowledge. And when you held up that universe card too, for me, I always look at it in that Kundalini or that snake. And sometimes where you see she's shielding with that big eye, the light that's coming in, it's almost like a reminder that we sometimes are trying to control the way that the light comes into our world or universe, but it's not really to place that attention and focus on it. You see that little structure at the bottom too, the little house. It's like we need to focus on working on what it is that we do want coming in. So yeah, just different perspective on it. But when we look into the next one, I know we're getting so close on time, but I did want to talk about dark matter, dark energy, mystical forces behind the seen and the unseen, where if we look at it from a I guess more of a physics point of view, this might be working with black holes or makos, as Barry Littleton calls them as well. And with the black holes, when I've looked into them and sort of more psychically felt into them, the information that has come through was more that there's sort of like a library or like a record of everything that's happened in our universe is stored within a black hole. So from my perspective, I don't really see it sort of being filled with nothing. I do feel that it's filled with all of the different things, almost like a storage system or some kind of like terabyte hard drive of the universe. How do you see dark matter, dark energy, and forces behind the seen and the unseen? Big question. Sorry, Phil.
Well, these are all attempts by us to use current language models to make sense of the world and to be able to explain it so that, we need a model to work with. Quantum physics works great over here. Darwinistic sort of physics works great over here. There's things that they agree on and there's things that they don't agree on, but it works fine over here for these things. It doesn't work over here for these things. This one works great for these things, but not for those things. And so when it comes to things like dark matter and the dark energy type thing, really what we're talking about is that we're starting to, the scientific paradigm is leaning into the idea that there's things that are working in the background that we don't have the instrumentation to sort of like objectively observe yet. And so that there needs to be some kind of aspect or elements within the current model that we just have to use as placeholders and go, well, there must be a thing and there must be an energy. So the dark matter is the thing and the energy is maybe the more the active component, if you will. And so there's unseen matter, and then there's unseen energetic presence. But, as far as like, I guess, these things are usable because when they're explained to us by intelligent people, they're going to generally be coming from a worldview that, it's either going to have useful elements to it or not. And look, to be fair, I don't have a lot of background on all the various different models and theories of reality. It's helpful in some ways because you can use that to essentially seek to communicate with academics. You can speak their language, which is great. But, a cursory or a peripheral sort of superficial sort of understanding, if you're a mystic, is helpful because it's not that you can bounce between models and test their usefulness, essentially. And so, as far as a black hole goes, I mean, if we look at everything being information, the food is information, the visual experience is a type of information. We've got all these inputs, these sensory inputs that are essentially picking up on information all the time. And that's making us, it's affecting us and influencing us. And we find ways to mitigate that influence because sometimes we don't want to be influenced, right? And that's why when we see the magician card, we see him with all the items on the table. He's got them there ready to use. They're not affecting him. He's got them on there ready to use, as he's the master of them rather than being mastered by them. So when I think about a black hole, we can speculate as to its properties, characteristics, and attributes. But what I would say is that it's where space and non-space share the same. Like it's a point in space where a non-space exists, but it's just it's like a portal to experiencing information in a different way. And so, there are things far beyond comprehension, beyond, like there's things that we can't verbalize, right? And that's why we have friends on the path, because you've had this experience and they've had a similar experience, but you haven't got the words to bring it down to the street to share the fruits with the good people of the village. And so, there are things that are beyond the intellect, and we're just trying to find the best ways to explain these experiential phenomena the best way we can, and that's all we can do. So I'm sorry if I haven't got the ultimate answer for that one, but hopefully that one's a good one.
No, it's good to hear your perspective on it. And, it reminds me also of the double split experiment, where, the way that we perceive things, or even being sort of, I guess, interacting our thought consciousness field with certain things, it does alter the outcome of reality too. So it's interesting just looking into these little topics. And our final question that we have is the expanding universe, or what we're looking into, the infinite dance of spirit and matter. So I guess exploring the understanding of the universe and how it's expanding, what this means, I guess, in reflection to our spiritual growth and evolution. And I guess when we hear about space, it's like from a more, I guess, God perspective or a spiritual perspective, there's that unfolding that's happening to try and understand ourselves or understand each other. And I guess that's why this leads to shows like this, where we're trying to conceptualize where we are, what we're interacting with, and I guess how do we affect creation. So yeah, just looking into the infinite dance of spirit and matter.
Yeah, so from a Hermetic point of view, which is what I tend to lean back towards when I'm seeking to explain things, just like I said, this is all about bringing it to the street, and this is the best language set. We're not talking about Renaissance Hermetics here. We're talking about the evolution of sort of the metaphysical holy. They are holy sciences, and that word probably needs some fleshing out too. But like this thing has a physical form. It has an astral layer to it, and it also has a mental layer to it. It doesn't have an immortal spirit occupying the mental layer. That's what separates us a bit. Like we are here in a sense, like as a free agent for the large part. And that's in some ways how we could be seen as being made in the image of God. Now, that does also require some explanation, and we can get into maybe that in the next one, where we talk about sort of like the four elements of creation. There's water, air, fire, and earth, and how they sort of pour out of the creative process. But the dance of like spirit interacting with matter. Okay, so when our spirit, when we're in the physical realm, when our spirit's in the physical realm, it may like it. We can. What's the best way to put this? If I go back to that word you use, which is the dance, when our spirit interacts with something, that thing can be changed, and also we can be changed somewhat too, and especially if the spirit is still slightly unrefined, it can be influenced. It's like one of the first meditations that we do is that we learn how to separate our mind, or our awareness, our point of consciousness, from the thoughts that are emerging in the mental field. We are not our thoughts. So all we're doing is separating and defabricating all these layers of reality so that we can remove the noise to get to the purest signal we can. And, but when we interact, just like that double slit experiment, which is, there's some contentious conversation behind that too, but essentially, snap, it looks like this. When I look at it, snap, take another photo, now it looks like this. And so that could be an example, because when you're talking about photons, which is like, light at the physical layer, if you will, we're talking about like the subtle of the subtle. And, when you start working with things like telekinesis, you're probably not going to start with a big object like this. You're going to think, well, how much mental energy, because there's energy at the different levels, different types of energy. How much mental energy is it going to take to move a big thing? You've probably got this unconscious pattern loaded in.
You start with like a little crumpled piece of paper, or, something of that sort of nature.
That's right. And, there was one guy that came up with the idea of like using a spider web with a piece of charred matchstick on it, because they're so light and easily influenced. And then you put a cup over it, and you sort to, to send perturbations out into the ether, ripples out, and then that will catch. Because
I've done that.
that's what
Uh,
we're doing.
with the
Sorry,
cloth. I just wanted to share a practical thing. Sorry.
please. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, if you get a cork, you put a needle in it, and then you get a tiny little square piece of paper that you fold in half, so it's got like a peak, like a roof. You
Yes,
just sit
yes.
it on top of the needle and put it under a glass, whether it's a vase or vase, whichever country you're from. And then you send your intentions to spin that. So you're letting your energy interact with the field of the paper. And my kids were able to spin it, as was I. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to be bringing you tips and tools and practical things over the next 2 episodes too. Tonight's more kind of like the introductory
Mm.
side for you guys to look into what it was that Phil and I wanted to share with you. And I've noticed we're at the top of the hour. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with? And I'm going to pop your website up, your Substack,
Thank
so
you.
that everyone can see.
Yeah, thank you. And so, hey guys, so there's a couple of things I want to quickly share, just very quickly, because I know we're going to call it. But you know, we're remembering our way back to our truest form, which is us freed and release of the various noises and stresses at the different layers of reality. And so we're releasing. So when we let go, we are releasing. And there's methods of release in Tai Chi in the physical sense. We're doing what's called sung, which is when something changes in an alchemical from one state to another, the alchemical process, there's a release. It changes that transitional process. We can do that at the different layers. And so what we're doing is that we're incrementally, step by step, convincing ourselves through satisfying our rational mind that there is a spiritual reality, because we can say there is and we can have the odd experience, but we've got to convince the deepest layers of ourselves, essentially through some kind of developing a conviction that. And we do this through we start off with, like Solreta said, you can get a piece of paper, or you can get a little bit of tin foil and you put it on and you cover it so that your breath and things aren't going to do it. Maybe you have to do it without the glass first. Maybe you haven't got the confidence and the conviction up to that level yet. You need a little bit of a you need to be encouraged. And so you don't want to put too many blockages in the encouragement pathway. Okay. It's not that you just blindly believe, it's that you go, wow, okay, I wasn't breathing out and the thing moved, you know. So that's the one thing, is that we're convincing ourselves through experiments, and having lots of experiments and toys to play with to make us constantly go, oh. And then the ultimate way to get that unconscious on board with this, so it serves us rather than fights us, because you remember, everything you learn in school was based around generally a materialist paradigm. That's hard baked into your formative years, man. That takes a long time to satisfactorily unfold. And so you're journaling, you're writing down, I did this, and then this happened. And then you go back and read it, and then your unconscious starts to get on board with that, because when you write it down, it's like you're making a big deal out of it, and it sees, oh, that's important. You want me to pay attention to that and assist you with that. It's like when you're working with the AI, it's like the more context you give it, the more it can help you, because you're narrowing down the thing, but you're getting it on board with you. Back to that. So that's one thing I wanted to share. And just quickly, and this is a bit of a selfless plug for my Substack, because I've gotten back into, I'm getting my writing, my blogs and my articles back up. I had a bit of a break. I'm still doing videos on the YouTube channel, and there's more coming there, guys. But yeah, please check out the Substack. I'm finding that writing is, there's a lot of interviews on there, but there's also, recently I've done a post on Reiki Rioho, which is my part one of my adventure into energy healing, and I'm just getting my momentum back up with that. And that one I think is a paid one, so there's a half, like half the articles there, and if you like it, you might, oh yeah, well maybe that's worth. It's like a coffee a month for Substack, but I'm sharing my adventure, and I'm trying to keep it pretty engaging and practice my writing, because storytelling is really like you want to, I tell you, you want to watch movies and read books and surround yourself in things that feed into what you want to do with your life, and it just helps,
That's
because
so true.
it just, if you want to live in the sacred, you got to stretch that out and fill your experience with things that you want. Be very careful about what and who and you surround yourself with. And yes, thank you. So this is my app, and it's really good. I really like this app. But coming up probably next week, I'm going to, if you just scroll down a bit further, you see that word dojo. So I'm going to be running some online webinar classes for basically vital force cultivation in the context, probably to start with Reiki, because I've got a way of teaching Reiki that is quite unique. And I think people are going to have if you've already done a lot of Reiki courses and read a lot, I think this will be something that, you will find to be satisfying. I'm going to come at it from the angle of, are you a bit bored with your Reiki, or, is it not doing it for you anymore? Is it not scratching the itch or whatever, or has it fallen down your list of things that you like to do? I want to help reinvigorate it. And this is not necessarily from the point of view of doing hands-on healing on yourself or others. This is an alchemical process which underlies it, which nobody's really talked about. Reiki has its own form of vibrated Kabbalah, which we have in the Hermetics program as well. And so I'm going to be sharing some pretty, I would say, slightly outrageous insights into this that are not just interesting to know, but that are completely actionable as well. So I'm going to set up a dojo. It's going to be Shodan, which is the first level of Reiki. And I'll put that up, and it'll be, go to my Substack, philrice.substack.com, sign up for the newsletter. I'll have your email address. And so you'll get me talking to you direct into your inbox rather than going through the YouTube gatekeepers and through the Facebook gatekeepers. So please sign up there, because then we can stay in direct touch. And I've just activated the group chat and Substack. So if you want to hang out with me and the crew, the people that are contributing like a monthly sort of like $6 or whatever it is, you can have direct interaction with me and other members who are, serious into this kind of conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And I just want to remind you guys that Sophie does have the 10% code Valentine for the love readings as well. So there's lots of things for you guys to explore. And I also have the discount code Jupiter to save 10%, whether it's a starseed reading, mystical oracle, or a wellness session. And thank you for the reminder, Lorianne. So we still have the Aura course available as well. So you can find that on the Academy, on Mason Jupiter's Academy. And if you click onto the Aura course, it will give you a lot of information and sort of break down a little bit of what you could expect inside of the class. And we have got people that are seeing auras, which has been amazing, and a few people that are also activating third eye vision, which is really cool too. So I just want to say thank you again to our beautiful audience. We look forward to bringing you part 2 and to have some practical tips and things that you guys can apply to be able to, I guess, on a material level and a super sensical level, not only expand your awareness and your senses, but also to have some fun and to play with reality a little bit more. Because I feel like this year we need to have joy, we need to have fun, we need to be like little kids again in the candy store, just like me playing with the crystals, as I've been telling you, Phil.
Yeah, hey, look, that's why kids are great, because they remind us of what we've forgotten. Like, there's a lot of expectations and requirements and responsibilities being a grown up, but we've got to keep that light alive and well in our lives. And I'm grateful for this channel and the wonderful audience and everyone that contributes to this, because we're feeding into what we want to create. Lone wolves die alone, guys. We're collaborating here, we're co-creating, and we're using, I love hardcore metaphysics stuff that I can action, and I want to bring this out more. And like Solreta said, let's give you some toys to play with so you can have fun getting back into being a creator. Look, in my view, we're the creation of a creator, whatever that might be. But maybe we're here to honor the process and be creators ourselves and put things into the world. And so if we can bring more joy and harmony and good vibes, we've got the deck stacked against us a little bit, guys. There's a lot of characters and actors in the world that have a different viewpoint, and they're allowed to do that by virtue of the fact that Providence allows that from the worldview I come from. So, but we're also allowed to, and I love terming this, we're completely allowed to engage in lawful, benevolent mischief, if we will. I just use that because it's a playful term. But there's ways to be a quirky creator, and to find an expression medium. Painting, drawing, digital art is awesome. Like learning how to use the new toys to build stuff. Man, it's a playground out there, guys. Yeah, we got to do the lawns and pay the tax and all that sort of thing. That's just kind of where we find ourselves. But there's ways to do things better,
Well,
and contribute towards the things we don't want less as well. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody. This has been awesome.
and yeah, I can see the audience has loved having you here, and Julie as well. And I just want to say thank you to Julie for all that you do for
yes.
us girls, and for having Phil on as well. We really appreciate it, and look forward to having some cheeky, mischievous fun in the next 2 episodes. Thanks, Phil. Thank you, beautiful community.
Thank you, everyone. See you guys later.